This is unceded land, and we have much to learn from the original people that cared for this land for thousands of years.
There is just a taste of David Suzuki protesting this past weekend on Burnaby Mountain. This is the site of a twinning. It is basically a pipeline that is being put in by Kinder Morgan, or at least they're attempting to put a pipeline in that area. But protests, of course, have stalled and stopped environmental assessments and people who are trying to take a look at the land before they actually get the project underway. Ray Hurd, Sara MacIntyre here to talk about it. Let's start off with the conversation about David Suzuki. His grandson was arrested. Clearly he was furious about the arrest, and now he is in a spot where the protesters are, where they really shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that David Suzuki was there. There was headlines to be had, and the environment was a part of it. So, of course, David Suzuki's going to arrive and blow some hot air for all of us to hear. But, you know, this is the height of hypocrisy for him and the environmentalists. There was a picture, I think, of Bridget DePape in the Vancouver Observer. She was the Stop Harper page, and she's talking on her iPhone that is covered in a silicone protector with her knapsack on her shoulder with all the plastic accessories. This is just the professional protesters. They don't actually realize what they are protesting. Plastics are a byproduct of oil. And so, you know, these kids that live and enjoy the first world amenities that oil produces for us, and yet at the turn when we're looking at exporting more of that to developing countries, they're there protesting.
Ray, I found it really interesting that you had David Suzuki out there saying, well, the RCMP, they can't make up their own laws. This is the result. There's this, you know, the RCMP are there as a result of what the court has decided. There was an injunction in place. Yeah.
And you can break the law. Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Mandela showed us this, as long as you're prepared to take the consequences of breaking the law. You go to jail, you get charged, you go before the court. But Suzuki is what I call a media monster. He shows up at high-profile events, he rants and he screams, and he usually arrives first class in a jet from somewhere else. I think he's there today from Malaysia, which is a long flight. It would be interesting to find out whether he paid economy. I bet you he didn't. And of course, the other thing about him, as Sun News has exposed, often when he goes to events, probably not this one, he insists on attractive female, quote, escorts, unquote, quote, to accompany him. So he carries some baggage, and I think he served a useful purpose at one point, but today he's overexposed, predictable, and really what we in the business call a media monster.
Sara, in the introduction I mentioned the idea that this is not a new pipeline project by any extent, and I think it's being spun out that way. Maybe even some of the protesters don't fully understand the fact that this is a twinning operation that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, this pipeline's been around in an operation for over 50 years. They've had no spills, no accidents at all. There was an incident a few years ago, but that's because a city worker backed into the oil pipeline with their truck. It wasn't actually a Kinder Morgan spill. So they have a tremendous safety record. They've been out consulting with a lot of the communities in advance of their environmental assessments. And really, this is just exploratory work to make sure that it's feasible to twin the pipeline along the existing pipeline. You know, I remember when pipelines were built all over this country and nobody paid attention. My dad, one of the last things he did, we lived in Sarnia, was built a pipeline from Sarnia to Joffrey. There was no media coverage then. Nobody knew.
No big protests.
We were all very happy about it. It was a crowning achievement in my dad's career in the oil industry. But you know, I think that unfortunately you have these group of very vocal, well-organized, well-paid, well-financed protesters that, as long as it's easy to get to in Burnaby, they are going to be there trying to shut them down at every chance.
Many of them, ironically, Sara, are financed by multi-million-dollar American foundations like the Rockefellers, who built their wealth on oil and gas. But I do think that Canadian politics is increasingly being dominated by rows about pipeline. There's another very important one in the news today, which is worth mentioning. This is this brilliant idea to reverse the pipeline that goes from east to west and bring it from Alberta oil safely in a pipeline rather than in rail cars, which are dangerous, to Quebec and Ontario. And there are going to be discussions within the next several weeks between Jim Prentice, the new Alberta Premier, and the Premiers of Ontario and Quebec. So pipelines are important. Pipelines basically create jobs, and these jobs spin off way beyond the actual pipeline. They have to be made. They have to be serviced.
Let me get back to David Suzuki for 1 second. I just want to have you take a quick look at his comments that he made to our reporter, Paige McPherson. Have a look at this.
What about the people who are bringing their children here today? Do you think that that's a good thing to do with these kinds of protests?
Holy cow, who are you representing?
I'm with Sun Media.
Sun Media. I should have known. I think it's up to them. It's up to them, and it's maybe a measure of how serious. Why the hell do I bother? I'm in serious discussion, not comedy. I'm sorry.
I don't think it's a funny question. Why do people bring their children
Some
here?
media is not serious media. So
I'm asking a serious
I'm not
question.
interested in talking to you. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Well,
What a smug, arrogant individual. No?
Nice job by Paige McPherson. I mean, really asking an important question. There was an 11-year-old girl.
That's right.
And her mother. They announced that they were going to cross the police line, so
That's
fully
right.
acknowledging that they were going to be arrested or held as a result of crossing the police line. And the mother was hence arrested, and the child was held. And so I think it's an important question. Should you be using children as pawns? I mean, obviously, this mother knew exactly what was going to happen if she crossed the line. She knew she was going to get a headline. She knew we would be talking about it.
Sure.
And so she used her kid in order to further get more headlines for this particular issue.
and his own grandchildren were there, and I think they were detained. But this takes us back to our friend Justin Trudeau, because what you heard Suzuki there was, in the end, refusing to answer a serious question.
And a legitimate one.
Yes,
And a legitimate one.
especially since his own grandkids were there. But he tried to brush it off by saying he doesn't take... Actually, I heard him say at the end, he's not going to talk to Sun News, and that's what Justin Trudeau decided to do after a run-in with Ezra Levant. So this is a tactic of walking away, saying you're not going to talk, and in the process of saying you're not going to talk, you are talking.
Yeah, and I think, Ray, and I'll put this to you, Sarah, I think that is an excellent point that Ray brings up, because if you're not willing to talk about those who perhaps will criticize you, if you're not willing to address the other side, then you're really just preaching to the choir. And I think that really ultimately is what David Suzuki is all about. Talk to your friends, talk to the people who like you, and don't talk to anybody who's going to give you a hard time.
Yeah, I mean, he's all about cherry picking and making sure that those that are supportive are mobilized. And the way to mobilize them is to talk to their friends and talk to them. It's not about actually convincing or having a rational discussion. This isn't about rational discussion and having an issue and trying to find a solution here. It's about rabble rousing, and it's about making sure that the protesters will stay there as long as possible. It's not about finding a halfway point. You cannot rationalize with people that have arrived at a position irrationally, which many of these environmentalists have.
And I would say, as a rational thinking person, that asking David Suzuki about whether or not children belong there is a legitimate question for this very reason. If a child gets trampled at one of these things, we've seen how protests have become violent when protesters cross over lines like they did here, where they're not supposed to go. If a kid gets hurt, if a kid got killed, would we not all be asking that question?
We would, and also, at a very young age, I'm not sure they should be taught to break the law, because they don't understand the pros and cons of doing it. So that in itself is a dangerous thing to do. I think children should enjoy their childhood and should not be brought to willfully, with their parents, break the laws of Canada. I think that sets a bad example and puts them possibly on the wrong track in life.
And I would say, Sarah, just sort of the final point here, the RCMP standing by, watching this, watching Mr. Suzuki sort of talk down to them with the microphone, with the megaphone, and tell them, oh yeah, well, I really like you, I had a lot of respect for you, but still, we think you're going too far. I just think that's the ultimate slap in the face.
Well, yeah, and not only that, he's, the RCMP basically sat by for 3 days, did not enforce the injunction, did not arrest anybody, gave everyone the opportunity to stand down, and instead the protesters decided to step up and into the RCMP's face. So I think it shows the real intentions that actually protesters were there to get arrested. So no matter what David Suzuki says, I think that the RCMP have got to do their job, they've got to enforce the law, and they've got to enforce the injunction.
And I think the RCMP are respecting the ancestral rights of the native people there. They're not barging in and being brutal, as they might have been in certain American jurisdictions. They're doing their job. If anything, they are a bit too tolerant or a bit too lenient. Here in Ontario, where we are now, there have been cases where the Ontario police have been almost too lenient in dealing
standing by
with
and watching
people,
things, yeah.
Native people who've occupied land that they don't own, it belongs to other people. So there's a fine line here, and I don't think this is going to get out of hand. It is a stunt. David Suzuki is really a showman. And it would be interesting to find out what his total costs are for traveling, how much carbon he is using to oppose carbon.
We're going to have